Mars at its root symbolizes masculinity, and the sign Taurus at its root symbolizes femininity. So, without trying to draw any specific interpretations from this, just let this be the red flag or the alert that you're going to expect a lot of disharmony throughout any of the specific resonances that occur between Mars and Taurus, because at the root, they're quite disharmonious. So in fact, what you find with Mars across the board is that its two most difficult zodiac spots are Taurus and Cancer. And why is it Taurus and Cancer? Because those are the two most feminine of the zodiac signs. With Taurus, you have Venus, a very feminine planet, and Earth, a feminine element. And with Cancer, you have Moon, a feminine planet, and Water, a very feminine element. So those two zodiac signs are the most feminine and hence the most challenging for Mars to operate in. So let's explore this red flag in a bit more detail. The first thing to consider is that masculinity means independence. Masculinity means self-reliance, self-focus. Whereas femininity means cooperation. So you have a difference between independence and individuality versus cooperation and groupiness. And it also can be seen as a clash between self-orientation, following one's own desires, following one's own ambitions, doing things for oneself, which is masculine, versus love, which means doing things for somebody else, doing things for somebody else's benefit. So because of the clash between the planet trying to be the independent part of us, Mars represents the independent, masculine, self-reliant part of us. But if you put it in Taurus, it has no resources to use that productively. Instead, all the resources it has in Taurus are geared towards cooperation and love and group orientation. So Mars gets frustrated in Taurus, and it's going to try to use its independent functions in an environment which is suited for cooperation. So the effect of having Mars in Taurus is that you find a person that doesn't really have selfless love. Their love is usually qualified, or their love is usually self-serving, and they don't really understand love or have much love. They tend to be more spontaneously selfish or think about how things will benefit them, how they can get ahead, or how they can get things. How can I get what I want from a relationship? And hence, they have more lust, because lust is the intense desire to satisfy one's needs. So Mars, Taurus people tend to be quite lusty, quite ambitious, quite selfish. With this same dynamic going on here of the clash with the independence of Mars trying to operate in the cooperation of Taurus, you get the effect of a person not really being particularly sensitive to others. So they'll lack empathy, for example. One of the reasons why they just don't think about what another person needs is because they just don't feel it. They don't feel what another person needs, they feel what they need. So there's lack of empathy or sympathy with Mars and Taurus, and that will also result in a lack of tact, like a lack of diplomacy or a lack of carefulness about how you say things or do things, which can also be explained or expressed as like bad manners, lack of culture. Now, another permutation of the clash between Mars masculinity and Taurus femininity is that masculinity is very inceptive, whereas femininity is very enduring. So inceptive means igniting things or starting things, and enduring means carrying things out or bringing things to long-term fruition. Femininity is carrying things to a fruition, but masculinity is getting things started. So when you have the planet that wants to get things started in a sign which isn't suited for getting things started, it's a sign which is suited for keeping things going, having endurance, having patience, and seeing them through to their end. So what you get with this clash, you have people who have a lot of hunger let's say, to describe this metaphorically, I would say they're very hungry, but they have poor digestion. Or to use another classic phrase, these people bite off more than they can chew. Their ambitions and their desires are very big, and it leads them into situations which they can't really easily keep up with. So another way of describing the same thing is to say that the person is hasty. They'll start things right away without thinking of, can I finish this? They'll get involved in a project or in a relationship because it's good right now, without wondering what it's going to be like tomorrow or next month or next year. Okay, and the third thing to identify that's really in the vibe or the dynamic of what's going on between Mars and Taurus is that Mars, being masculine, is a planet of competition, sports, whereas Taurus, being feminine, is a sign of cooperation, teams. So, when you have a clash between the planet that wants to be competitive with this, this planet of competition is in the sign that's only affords resources for being cooperative. So the competitive nature of Mars is going to cause a problem to cooperative things. So one result is you'll find Mars Taurus natives get jealous quickly, and easily, and often. Jealous of their partner, jealous of their teammate, competitive with their teammate. So they'll be also untrusting of the people that they're in unions with. They're untrusting the people they're in partnerships with. They're untrusting the people they're on teams with. And they're prone to fight. This is another permutation of this. Competition or struggle is coming into the arena of Taurus, which is cooperation and peace, negotiation. So it's going to spoil the peace and the negotiation and the cooperation by introducing the energy of competition. So these people would prefer to fight. They like to fight. They're prone to fight. They get into arguments. Now, this doesn't sound great, does it? Mars and Taurus sounds like awful. Well, that's the way it is. Sometimes planets are really good in certain signs. Sometimes planets are really bad in other signs. And you happen to be the person that's stuck with a Mars and Taurus, and you're thinking, I'm going to unsubscribe from this channel because he just made me depressed. It's not that Mars and Taurus is the only thing in your chart. But it is one thing in your chart, and it's one dynamic or thread that's in the tapestry of your life that you should try to understand. Not everybody with Mars and Taurus is the same person, because everybody has a lot of other things besides Mars and Taurus. But you don't water down the Mars and Taurus. Try to understand the Mars and Taurus as one of the threads that's a part of the tapestry that is your life. And also understand that this is baseline Mars and Taurus. Depending on the degree in Taurus, Mars will get different avastas, Mars will get different subdivisions within Taurus, and hence have different moods and natures, and do these basic things in different ways, sometimes more intense, sometimes more beneficially. Depending on the different aspects that Mars gets from other planets, it can be giving more beneficial versions or permutations of these same themes, or less beneficial. So with that said, let's take a look at a few actual people that have Mars and Taurus. The list that I compiled of people that I find particularly interesting. First, we have a group of people that are very, very war-oriented, fighting-oriented. Hitler. Hitler is a great example. I'll explain why in a moment. John F. Kennedy. Kind of, you might think he's a peace person, but he was the president of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he's dealing with the Cold War. So it's another interesting example of Mars and Taurus. Osama bin Laden, Fidel Castro, Nancy Pelosi, Muhammad Ali. Then after this group of people, we have a bunch of musicians. And actually, this was one thing that they mentioned in Suravali, which is a classic Sanskrit text on astrology. They said that they tend to like music. I can't really figure that out myself, but it has been noted in the classic texts that Mars in Taurus tends to like music. I think it's because there's passion of Mars is coming into this area of Venus where there's arts. So they may get some passion for arts, but it's not a major thing about Mars and Taurus. But you do see a certain kind of musician, which is a very spicy type, a bold type. So you have Madonna, Kesha, Debbie Harry, Queen Latifah, Janet Jackson and Michael Jackson, Mick Jagger and Lenny Kravitz. Then you have actors and actresses, Robert De Niro, Bruce Willis, Chuck Norris, fighter. Also, you could put him up there with Muhammad Ali in terms of being a fight-oriented person. Jessica Alba, Lucy Lawless, the warrior princess. To look in a couple of these charts for more detail, let's look at Hitler's first. Why is Hitler such a great example of how lousy Mars and Taurus can be? Well, there's a couple of very, very, very significant reasons, which should illustrate what I was talking about before, how it makes a difference where the Mars and Taurus is in your chart. Hitler's Mars and Taurus is extremely dominant in his chart because it's exactly conjoined to the First Lord. It's exactly conjoined to the First Lord, and it's being defeated by the First Lord. That means that the First Lord is assuming all of its traits, taking all of its treasure. So that the Mars in Taurus, all of the stuff that we talked about, it is really, really obvious and dominant in the person of Adolf Hitler. Not only is it exactly conjoined to First Lord, but it does so in the 8th house, which is not a pleasant house, which is kind of a deathy-oriented house. It's also in Bharani Nakshatra. This also happens in this period of time, these centuries. You'll get Bharani Nakshatra in Taurus. So it gets pretty heavy. And Hitler's Mars is in Taurus, also in the Navamsha. So it's getting really empowered, even though and then giving all that power to the First Lord by its defeat. So this is a very extreme chart, Hitler's case of Mars and Taurus. Let's take a look at JFK's chart, which also has a very well-documented birth time. His Mars and Taurus is also in the 8th house like Hitler's. And it's also in Bharani Nakshatra, like Hitler's. But it's in Gemini Navamsha. The degree that it is at in Taurus puts it in Gemini Navamsha. And most importantly, his Mars and Taurus is most strongly influenced by Jupiter and Mercury, two more diplomatic and intelligent planets. So he's getting these qualities. You know, he's very up, for example, he's probably the most famous president for adultery and things like that. He's involved with the Cold War. There's a lot of conspiracy around him, etc. So he's got a lot of Mars and Taurus visible in his life, but it's being modified very strongly by Jupiter and Mercury. So it's not quite as aggressive and barbaric as with Hitler. It's more tempered and sly. I thought it would also be interesting to look at Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali has Mars and Taurus in the 10th house, career, with Saturn. So very, very, very tough, brutal career. He's a boxer. And it's in Ashwini Nakshatra. So it's more attractive. And Muhammad Ali's degree, the Mars in Taurus is at the degree, which puts it in Capricorn, Navamsha. So it's getting exalted by its Navamsha within Taurus, so it's working to his favor more than to his disfavor. And then of the musicians, I felt like looking at Kesha's chart. Kesha is 6th house, Mars and Taurus, with nobody, just by itself. And it's also in Ashwini, like Muhammad Ali. And it's in Aquarius D9. Not quite like Muhammad Ali's, but close. It's also in a Saturn Navamsha. So it's kind of just sitting there. It's not really as dominant as in the rest of these charts. So it's just giving like a lot of lusty ambition and nature like that. I also had a look at Mick Jagger's chart. There it's in the 12th house with the moon. So with Mick Jagger, it's with an exalted planet. So similar to JFK, where it's getting influenced by very good planets, Mick Jagger's getting influenced by a good planet, an exalted planet. It's also in Barney, like JFK and Hitler, but it's in Aries Navamsha. So like Muhammad Ali, it's getting more dignified via the degree that it's at within Taurus. And so it's causing it to work in his favor more than him being discredited by it. So he's well known. You know, he's a rock star, so he's got 1 million women, and he's selfish, and, you know, who knows what else. But it's kind of makes him even more famous, because this Mars in Taurus is with good dignity via the Navamsha. So hopefully that clarifies to you how the specific details of a planet in a sign really make you have to modify the baseline interpretation of the planet in the sign, but not change. You don't go to an entirely different interpretation. You modify the baseline interpretation, and what I teach you in the main part of the video, the first part of the video, is the basic baseline interpretation. So hopefully that's all useful to you, and I'll see you around next week for Mars and Gemini. Take care. Now, what we do in these videos with the planets and the signs is I show you a consistent technique that you can use for any planet and any sign. And the technique is very simple. You look for where the planet symbolizes something that's very, very similar to what the sign symbolizes. And once you find that, you assess whether or not the planet and the sign are harmonious about that thing, or whether they're antithetical about that thing. The dissonant resonance reveals what's complex or difficult for the native. The harmonious resonance, on the other hand, indicates what's easy, what comes natural, what's an inherent strength for the native. What I'm teaching you really is the method of how to do astrological interpretation by going down into the engine of the symbolism and comparing the parts. The actual interpretation that you should give is going to be individualized per the individual chart. So if you have person A with the moon in Scorpio and person B with the moon in Scorpio, it's not going to be exactly the same interpretation, because person B's moon might have an aspect from something and person A's moon doesn't, etc., 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 etc. But what I'm showing you in the videos is the backbone of what a planet and a sign symbolizes. And once you understand that backbone, you modify it based on the circumstances, the extraneous circumstances that are affecting it in an individual chart. So I hope you really like this system, not just this one video, but all the videos that we do on the planets and the signs. We'll do them all. And I hope you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of those. And I hope to see you around soon. Thank you.